All right, guys, welcome back. Hope you all have had a good weekend. Let us jump in here, kind of do a overview of the general market, what we have coming up this week that we can look forward to. So earnings season is starting to kick into full swing here. A bunch of banks reporting Tuesday morning: Citi, Goldman Sachs, JPM, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, etc. We are also going to start to see some of the semiconductor names reporting, some bigger ones. ASML, TSM, you have AEHR reporting, a bit of a smaller one. Healthcare names are starting to report. Johnson & Johnson, ELV, UNH, ABT, ISRG, and then mega caps with Netflix as well. So you have a few different things starting to show up on earnings that will affect the kind of flow you see and what to expect in the market as far as what's going to be moving and maybe some catalysts throughout. So banks are the big one kicking it off as usual to start with, and then we will have our mega caps coming up here in next week and the week after. So that being said, we not a ton of data tomorrow. Tuesday is CPI, Wednesday is PPI. Thursday, you have retail sales, you have weekly jobless claims, a few other things, and then Friday you have a couple things as well with the University of Michigan preliminary consumer survey at 10 a.m. So Monday, not much, and then the rest of the week we should have some data to move the market. So with that being said, let's jump in here and start looking at some charts. So SPY, after basing for a couple months now sideways, we have a pretty healthy look, right? So we had the kind of failed breakdown here, held the anchored VWAP from that April 8th gap up. Last week held up well while the semis were selling off. And now we are, we're holding this weekly 8 EMA, and we are curled up here, closing at the highs from Friday. Very, very close to all-time highs. If we come down to a daily chart, you can kind of see we held the 382 from that April 8th gap up. That would indicate a very strong trend. If that continues to hold up and everybody is spamming this downtrend, again, I would lean more into the horizontal resistance that is through here. But clearly on the verge of trying to break out here on SPY. Very strong look, shaking off all the new war headlines again, and is curled up here looking for all-time highs. QQQ, not quite up there with SPY. Again, these were, hit pretty hard with the semiconductors. A lot of those names lost shape here over the last couple weeks. So seeing what survived the damage is, where we'll be looking. But QQQ, and I should probably just go ahead and put an alert up here on this week's high, but a failed to hammer off the weekly 8 EMA, right? We had the 312 set up for a potential break to the downside. It triggered and they saved it. This turned into a big failed breakdown. And now, it was still a 312, but this is a failed to hammer. So it looks like momentum is, pointing back up. And this was the failed to candle off that low, swiped it, closed at the highs, and then we closed higher the other 2 days of the week after. So strong look here on Q, still, more mid-range. And I think a lot of this will depend kind of on what semiconductors do. But again, semis here, also a failed breakdown look. And again, that April 8th gap up VWAP was the bottom. Failed to candle there off the 50-day we talked about. And ended up being, what looks like to be the bottom so far. Another fail to on Friday after gapping lower. But the weekly candle is a nice kind of like hammer candle, closing back up and above that weekly 8 EMA. So we have these larger dark pool prints still above us that we need to, kind of get back above, up in that 624.70, 633.24 area. But still mid-range, right? SPY looks a little bit more constructive up near the highs. QQQ, SMH definitely have a little more work to do, right? So Everything overall looks constructive. This week was the, failed breakdown, in my opinion. If sellers were going to press us lower on tech and semis, this was the week to do it, and they kind of fumbled the ball so far. So we're back into this mid-range and need a little bit more data to see what's going to happen here. But so far, this week's low is a pretty good low to work off of to see if we can build off of that. So not going to spend much time on any of the other ones. RSP still trending. IWM, a little bit of weakness Friday comparatively, but still riding its 21 and 34-day moving averages here. And the DIA just continuing to trend higher as well. So nothing really to report here. No, nothing to talk too in depth about past QQQ, SMH. I think that is going to be obviously the deciding factor on the market, what semiconductors are doing. But overall, I'd say breadth has been pretty good the last week while that sell was happening. So we'll see kind of how they keep shaking this up. The day-to-day rotations can get kind of annoying here, but that's what we have. So I don't know if I should start with mags first or NVIDIA and just kind of show what happened here, right? So last week we talked about this failed 2 candle on NVIDIA, that kind of doji against the 618. Prior high, the 200-day on the daily, yada yada, and what happened here? We had a big follow-through week back up. So fail 2 was the hint that sellers kind of dried up here, buyers took back over, a little bit of an indecision candle, but closed higher after failing to break lower there. And we got the push higher this week. So again, we talked about this one kind of in depth, but NVIDIA, beautiful reversal, beautiful, NVIDIA really stood up here and took over when some of the other names were kind of falling apart. So NVIDIA, obviously a very heavy weighting in the S&P and the SMH, and is helping carry things here. It's going to be very hard for the market to sell off when NVIDIA is putting in daily candles like this back to back. So obviously NVIDIA is on radar here. It's part of the mags, right? The one we're going to talk about next. So NVIDIA just now breaking its downtrend, looks very powerful here. And you've got quite a bit of time until they report pretty late in the season. So NVIDIA definitely on watch here for continuation, still kind of inside this bar. We'll see if any kind of dips happen back towards that 200 area, or if this is just going to break out and get going and really help carry the market here. So that being said, we'll move over and start to look at mags. People wanted to look at this, and I think it's important to look at just based off some of the prints and what we're seeing this week. So mags, MAGS, right? Big retracement into the 618, kind of a prior low area, and it has been straight up off the lows, partly in thanks to Apple. Apple's been really strong. And then in the last week, obviously, NVIDIA has helped carry, Meta's helped carry. The others have kind of not been participating as much, but kind of flagged here sideways off the 200-day for the Mag 7. And we got the breakthrough. There was that clear, like, inverse head and shoulders look we were looking at. And, it's not far back away from that the number 1 dark pool print on record for Mag 7. So as semis, continue to consolidate and try and build out here, I'm wondering if the Mag 7 kind of take over and try to lead. They have earnings next week and the week after. Maybe we get a week of upside here up into that, and then earnings will kind of decide what we do from there. But I think this is a good spot to kind of have our attention this week, especially with that NVIDIA breakout, and then to work through these, in the order of the strongest ones. Apple very, very close to all-time highs here. And to kind of zoom out, we had the big breakout from April into June. To me, this looks like a 2-step corrective wave lower, kind of a retest the breakout here. And, buyers stood up in a big way and pushed us right back up here into right underneath all-time highs. So Apple, heavy watch here for a run into the end of July 30th, where earnings are. all-time highs are not far away. We definitely started to see some speculative flow on Friday, pointing much higher ahead of and into earnings for Apple. So maybe it takes a few more days to kind of consolidate this range. Obviously, very powerful move off the lows. I wouldn't mind another session 2 or 3 here for the 8-day to get really tight up here under that all-time high area. But obviously the market will do what it wants to do, so we'll just be watching for that all-time high break to kind of see what happens. So moving on to Meta, obviously, one of the strongest moves this week in the market. Huge failed breakdown here on Thursday. Looked into that gap and failed miserably. Buyer stepped in a big way, and we have gapped this downtrend, the 200-day, and then this anchored VWAP here from prior lows. I have one from the tariff sell-off there. So Meta is in the crazy looking weekly candle here. So Meta is out of this downtrend. I could probably draw like a more conservative one here, and give it some room up to the top. So Meta, big move. Maybe we see a little bit of consolidation. Maybe they run it straight up, but this makes it a little bit more difficult here, this gap up, in my opinion. So we'll kind of see if we get any kind of inside bar consolidation. In 2 sessions, things have changed very quickly. We're obviously back up off these moving averages very, very fast here. Prior like resistance area here from that gap fill. Take off some of these moving averages, but you can just kind of see, just to give you some pause here. If you miss Meta, just wait for it to set back up. I wouldn't be chasing through this area. I believe it can set up and be a little bit more constructive. Again, we rallied straight into that off the lows last time, and that's exactly where we failed. So we'll be watching this horizontal resistance area, more so the 680, to see if we can bail out flag here. And I think this could be a potential, run into earnings into the end of July as well. Amazon, it attempted to break 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 inside days here. On the 8th, the failed breakout, right? We took that high, looked above, and closed lower. So that would pop up on your failed 2 scanner for the session Friday. A little tricky here, in my opinion. Back above the moving averages, so this just could be a nothing burger candle if we continue to hold here. Again, this also, in my opinion, has a kind of inverse head and structure look, in my opinion. Left shoulder, head, and then kind of this right shoulder building out looks just like MAGS overall, in my opinion. Like all these names kind of have this that we'll start talking about here, but this is the 50% retracement from this impulse lower. Obviously a big line in the sand here, that 250 area. It's exactly where we wicked up to in that big push up that Monday. So very tight here against the moving averages, and 250. I would wait and see if 250 can get reclaimed, because this looks a lot like that Meta chart, right? We had that break above, and now we're back into that zone. Like Meta had that breakout that came back under. So this is going to be a big spot for it. So far, it's held like kind of a higher low retracement. Thursday was very, looked like we were going to go, right? Big outside day Thursday. Friday, you get the break up, and it just kind of fails. So a little bit of indecision here, getting tight here on Amazon, but we'll see if it can hold these moving averages. Both weeks here were, we triggered up, didn't really go anywhere yet, but the weekly is trying to reverse here. These weekly moving averages getting tight and trying to push back up. So really we just need to see 250 as the trigger build here. We're working back through this, so there will be some resistance through here, but Amazon also looks good, just kind of in a little sticky area here through that 250 spot. Google, actually, again, same kind of thing. We're retracing this move lower. We went up to that 50% retracement this week on Google and failed. So this is a failed 2 on the weekly, right? So this would come up on like a bear scan to look for it lower, but I think it's more complicated than that. Again, inverse, left shoulder, head, right shoulder, like structure. Inside day Friday from Thursday. So again, retrace 50%. VWAP from lows. This is a great area for it trying to build back up and push back higher here. It's just, has some work to do. Moving averages are starting to curl back down here, so we need to see a pop back up here on Google. But overall, the structure is constructive, in my opinion, for all of these Mag 7 names to try and push higher up into earnings. Probably will try to focus on the ones that look the strongest right now, but again, this can change day to day on what I'm seeing. Google could take this inside day upside Monday and run all week through that 360 area back into 370. So we'll just kind of see how things play out into this week. But just looking at this now, good dip buys off 350 in my opinion, as long as that holds. Just be careful. 360, want to see some volume coming here and buyers trying to push us back out of this. And Tesla popped up on the 2 up right inside bar, so it popped up on the armed long trigger because we're inside. It's an inside week, we're inside month, so a lot of consolidation going on for Tesla here. Moving averages on the weekly very, very, very tight. Tesla move is imminent. Will it do it before earnings? We're kind of running out of time here for the 22nd, so a week from Wednesday. But Tesla, obviously part of the Mag 7 as well. And a move is brewing, right? We saw the player come in for earnings on Friday, $1 million for the 724 calls. So someone is positioning for a run up into earnings. Do we get them on all the names? We will see, but Tesla getting very, very tight here. So want to keep an eye on this one this week. Once we get into next week, I typically don't trade them the couple days up into earnings just because. But Tesla getting very, very tight. And I think I'm going to reset all my alerts after that. Anyway, so let's look at Bitcoin after this, because some of these names are just getting really, really tight here. So Bitcoin last week was a failed 2, right? Took the lows off this broadening formation and closed higher. This week we wicked lower. We had the another MSTR selling Bitcoin headline, and they whipped it back up. Weekly 200 SMA is through here. We do have some weekly divergence on BTC as well, building out here. But obviously a lot of work to do on Bitcoin. Just more of a sentiment watch here to see, risk on, maybe just kind of things expand on where money is going. But so far, just not a lot of interest in it. Main reason I bring this up is because coin popped on one of my scanners and is getting extremely tight here. Double inside weeks now against a declining 8 EMA. So this would just be kind of a bear flag. So, if we do see Bitcoin weakness again, and this breaks back down, 155 is kind of your trigger area, that 154.78 could just be continuation of the trend. But we are at a major retracement and support area through here. So, I'm kind of open-minded on which way this can break, right? This is a pretty big spot through here. So if we see Bitcoin turn, this is not a bad spot to build a reversal, but I don't have a bias on it just because the trend is down. Willing to play it either way, but as the weekly range tightens here, a bigger move is brewing in my opinion. So we'll kind of keep this on radar. I've got some alerts set on coin. Now, I'm just trying to figure out how I want to break this down because personally right now I kind of want to see how at least Monday shakes out before I start to declare, names I like better than others. But kind of a few things I want to go through here just to talk about my, I go through a lot of stocks and I set alerts on them for the week ahead. Doesn't mean I'm going to trade all of them. I'm just going off what the weekly candle setup looks like from the prior week. And then you have to be open-minded and kind of see what triggers and confirms into the following week, right? So it's just a setup. We need to see things kind of prove themselves here. So, but this Baidu chart is pretty interesting to me. And we had a little bit of change of character this week in China. Obviously, had the Baidu gap up headline that is holding so far. Baidu has a little bit more positive structure, in my opinion. A little bit easier to talk about this one as a constructive look. So this is a weekly chart. We had a big, base build out from 2024 into the end of 2025. We broke out and we have been consolidating here for, quite a while now, almost a year we've been in this range. In my opinion, there is a broadening formation here, right? We keep making lower lows, bounce, lower low, bounce, lower low, starting to bounce. So possible lower low before the next rally. There are a few areas of confluence through here. The 2025 year-to-date VWAP is sitting through here. It's where we bounced last time. If you take this move lower here and measure it off this last peak, it stops at the 786, completion retracement. So in my opinion, this could be a corrective wave about to be completed. It has the head and shoulders like failed breakdown look, in my opinion. And again, this is popping on my scanner because the prior week moved higher and this week printed an inside bar. So 120 is the trigger area. Your weekly moving averages are kind of stacked here in this 121.5 area. So 120, 121, I think opens up at a minimum back up to this 130. That's your year-to-date VWAP. And then the prior, can't remember if that's a quarter or monthly high there, probably monthly. Yeah, monthly high. So Baidu, potential bottom here. Need to see some confirmation. It's possible it consolidates here a little bit longer, but everything pointing to this being a great workable area to get long off of for a potential run up into earnings for the China names. But Baidu, out of the big ones, looks the most constructive. And then something that popped up to me outside of that for some China sentiment is when actually they have a ton of China exposure. And to me, this kind of looks like a big breakout retest, like consolidated, lower low, breakout. And now we are like back consolidating this range, kind of an inverse, not really inverse head and shoulder structures because we're making a lower low. It looks like another broadening formation. But in a retracement area in the weekly 200 SMA area and actually in the IPO VWAP area all the way back from the early 2000s that you can see this line going across here at 98.64, I think. Yeah, 98.64. So very, very big area for when to be compressed at so tightly. Spreads aren't that great on this one, but it's more so of a sentiment watch if a name with a lot of China exposure starts to rally. And again, this is on my scan because this was a big failed to 50% candle. So interesting spot for that to kind of take place. That 100 area, obviously your psych area, but even if we get a move back up to the top of this range, it's good for a 10% move, right, to 110 or something possibly. Earnings not until the first week of August, so you have the rest of the month of July for this to kind of play out and bounce. But I thought that was interesting as far as China sentiment and something to kind of keep on watch there. Tesla's definitely up there on the inside bar scan as far as my interest in it. Hood is interesting where it's at, but I don't really have a bias on that. I think Nike, we keep seeing retail pop up, and this chart is interesting with the weekly divergence down here off the lows, and definitely some tight consolidation, right? We had the big outside bar from earnings, retrace that, and we are trying to build higher off of it. So structurally, to me, this looks like a reversal in the making. For Nike, you've got this gap fill up here, and even the broadening formation, in my opinion. So Nike looking for like that 47, 48 area, possibly up to 50, just based off some of the higher time frames. But just seeing that kind of around on the retail theme, right? We talked about Best Buy last week. That got the breakout into the end of the week. Elf keeps popping up. That one's still looking pretty constructive. Lulu actually popped on my outside bar scan. Inverse head and shoulder structure here. But you can kind of see big fail too, and now we're trying to build off of that. Weekly 8 EMA is right here at 121.77 on Lulu, which it has not been above in a very long time, right? So a little bit of an attempt here, failed. And this is IPO VWAP at 127.18. So it's consolidating around a huge area here. You can kind of see that's exactly where we held back through, the mid 2010 area. So Lulu, just with the retail thing, Lulu, Nike kind of beating up retail names. Maybe something here. Not a huge watch for me, but just kind of seeing this pop up. Nike more so than Lulu. I think the structure's pretty good on it. Talked about coin already. Cart. I think I looked at the spreads on this. It's actually pretty friendly. So I think this is could be tradable here. But again, I'll start with the monthly and then kind of talk about what I see on it. But we have like when we look at candlesticks, there's like an auction between the buyers and sellers, right? They kind of depict what happened at the end of it. So what has happened on these monthly candles every time we get up in this range, right? We get seller step in. We had the break higher, but seller stepped in a big way. Seller stepped in again. Seller stepped in, right? A little bit of a change of character on this candle, right? I mean, we've had a couple candle closes up here, but what happens immediately following after we get the big sell the next month once they trigger up? So keep that in mind when if this does trigger up, that this is where sellers have been sitting. But this is not far from, it's not a huge float. This is not far from all-time highs. I think a break of 50 could bring a test of this at a minimum pretty quickly, that 53.50. But this is honestly shaping up to be one of my favorite setups going into this week, which, kind of an oddball name, but earnings roughly mid-August. I think the 821.50s or the 55s, if you want to be more aggressive, can work here. Inside month on July from June, and we are right up in the top of this range. But the reason this popped up is because last week was a 3, right? We took highs, we took lows, and this week was an inside bar. So it is a little off the weekly 8 here, right at the weekly 5. So momentum is strong. That's something you can work off there as long as we stay up above that 46 area, 46, 47. But this is what I'm trying to show you. Like in this, I talked about this when UPS came through when I said, buy the dip on UPS, but I never even bothered to go look and see what this headline was, but big gap down, obviously something negative, immediately bought up, right? And buyers were anxiously awaiting a dip to buy here. So wouldn't surprise me if that news headline was some sort of manipulation, and we are back up here flagging right under last month's highs. Again, we just came from $42 to almost $50 in a week. Maybe a few more sideways sessions here before we get the break, but cart honestly shaping up to be one of my favorite looks here going into the latter half of July. If we can break that 49.21 and sustain it, very interesting look for such a random name. And that's where it kind of gets to where we'll just kind of have to wait and see what happens this week. I think CBRS is worth mentioning. Big failed 2 weekly candle here. Double inside weeks now. Obviously still has quite a bit of work to do, but in my opinion is trying to kind of build out a base here. This weekly candle is very suggestive that buyers are strengthening up in quite a big way, in my opinion. So this is on the radar. The spreads are kind of trash, but it's definitely playable. There's a couple 2x leverage ETFs you can play also. But this is on the verge, I think, of turning and maybe turning into one of those IPO names we see go on a bigger run, right? So still has to prove itself, but this weekly candle structure to me is starting to say, hey, pay attention to me a little bit closer here. So IPO VWAP up at 238.71. Obviously a little far away right now, but if we see that get taken here in a more serious way, I would really be paying attention to this one. This one is also up there on my list to watch this week. A bit trickier name here, but definitely up there on the watch list. So let me see what else. A lot of these semiconductor names were on the scan. I think I will mention Light while we're on here. But right off this 50% retracement from the 2026 lows, this is the first, right? We had this failed 2 candle up here, failed miserably. It triggered the high and failed. So probably, when we see something trigger and then you see it lost, just get out of the way, right? You need to see confirmation hold. So tricky part here, but I also like this because it's right off that monthly 8 EMA, which has been a nice trender. And then a level I'd be watching is that monthly open at 818.41. If we start to push and break back through that, this is going to be a big hammer candle on the monthly, if not more, just depending on what they do with this. But if we see semis come back to life here, I think optics are not a bad, rotation just based off this weekly candle. Obviously, there's still like a few like red flags to me, like this GLW gave up that whole all-time high push right back to the weekly 8 EMA and this VWAP. AAOI looks like hell. CIEN is okay. Another failed 2 candle here that popped up. So I'm not like super sold on these optics names and kind of want to see what we do here, but right off that 618, and that's probably another monthly 8 EMA there. So some of the bigger, like healthier optics names are coming into trend support. So we'll kind of see what we do. I'm over 30 minutes here. I'll just mention again that TSM and ASML report earnings this week. Could be, a deciding factor on what semis do, at least for a day or two. So Mag 7 kind of in focus. Tesla, the inside month, inside week. Uber still looks good. Uber's on the 3-1 list. I'm sorry, failed 2-1 list on Uber. That one's trying to build out. And then the AI utility names they can't get much tighter. They're going to break one way or the other here soon. So those are definitely on radar. But again, we'll just kind of see how the first day of the week plays out, see what we get. And then I'll try and focus in a little bit tighter on what we will be focusing in on. But that'll wrap up the week ahead look. Have a great rest of your Sunday. We'll see you all tomorrow.